Well, we're coming off of Veterans Day week, and of course, we had our great show down at the World War I Museum and Memorial here in town on Friday. And as far as I'm concerned, we should take more than one day to think about our vets. And we know that Fox News does that on a fairly regular basis. They've got their Patriot Awards coming up on Thursday night. It's going to be on Fox Nation. It's taking place in Nashville. And the MC is going to be Pete Hegseth, who joins us on KCMO in Kansas City. Pete, good morning. Thanks for being here.
Pete, thanks for having me.
Hey, let's just start off. I mean, you're a veteran yourself, of course. You're coming off, I'm sure, plenty of Veterans Day celebrations last week that you were in some way, shape, and form involved with. Where are we at today? I know we're not in the middle of some global conflict like we have been over the last 20 years or so, but how should we be thinking about Veterans Day this year at this time with everything going on around the world?
That's a great question. I think it's something that with the wars wound down mostly in Iraq and Afghanistan, the war isn't as front and center. Of course, what's going on in Israel is and what's going on in Ukraine is, but it's not a U.S. direct action. So it's tempting to sort of think that see it as something somewhere else. And I think it's really – and then that on top of the fact you're basically – about to lose the World War II generation. I think it's a important moment to double down on the recognition of the cost of freedom. And so that's why on Fox and Friends, we went almost the entire show talking about Veterans Day. And I was in the first National Veterans Day parade happened this year. It's good to see that recognition is happening. We need it right now more than ever. We don't agree on much for a lot of reasons we could talk about all morning long, but at the very least, we should recognize the value of those who serve. And the state of our military right now is precarious. Mm-hmm. We've got recruiting problem, we've got woke problems, we're social engineering inside those ranks, and so we're going to need that next generation, but we better fix that Pentagon too.
Great point, and you say this obviously as a veteran, as many people know, and I hear from so many veterans that don't, and it's similar to law enforcement, they don't want their kids to do what they did because of some of the issues that you've just mentioned, not having the community support, having all the woke nonsense, infiltrating military and law enforcement when it has nothing to do with the job and the task at hand. And that's a problem because oftentimes, as these folks come from lineage that serve their communities or serve their country. How big of a concern is that in folks that you talk to?
No doubt, you're right. You're right on target. I have the same struggle myself. The next book I'm writing comes out next year. It's basically about not how the military went woke, but how the military allowed itself to go woke. And as part of that, I'm kind of writing a letter to my own boys, trying to determine what my advice would be to them. I mean, the challenge is if you don't like Missouri or you don't like, California, you can move. Or if you don't like your school, you can move to a different school or you can homeschool. But if we don't like what's going on in our Pentagon, there's no one else is flying F-16s and leading infantry battalions. So we better get this one right. And I'm still leaning toward, if you're going eyes wide open, and go for the most elite units you can be a part of, where there's a lot less nonsense. But we're going to need a commander-in-chief that's going to clean house. I mean, fire generals, hold people accountable, stop emphasizing race and gender in units that should only be about meritocracy. We are off our rocker, but it's not like other systems where it's going to take generations. This is a leadership challenge that can be addressed almost immediately. And so I do have hope, but I understand those reservations from people for sure.
What about on the Pete Hegseth joining us, of course, Fox and Friends weekend host. He's hosting the Fox Nation Patriot Awards this week. When it comes to foreign policy, it seems like, and I understand it, I think we're all sympathetic to what is both sides of the aisle in many ways, not wanting any part of any international conflict, isolationism setting in. And it's a fine line. I mean, not that we want to be involved in everything, but America does play a role on the global stage. So how should we be looking at whether it's Ukraine, whether it's Israel? I mean, in China, how do we put this all together and make sense of it in terms of what America's role needs to be?
Man, that's the right question. All I know is the default setting of America needs to be overwhelming strength. Needs to be, if you mess with us, you're in trouble. And that keeps a very shaky equilibrium and balance, at least for now. I mean, there's so many other aspects, trade, cultural approach. I mean, what China's doing with technology and social media, forget all that. our enemies need to know that we will crush them if they try to do something against our interests. Then it's about figuring out what those interests are. I mean, when it comes to Ukraine, listen, I'd love to see Ukraine expel Russia from their borders, but I don't believe Russia is going into Eastern Europe or into Paris. And as a result, Europe should be shouldering the burden of the defense of Ukraine and the defense of their eastern flank. In Israel, we should be supporting them and saying, do what you got to do, and to include Iran, because they can't live with a nuclear-armed Iran in their neighborhood. But the way Trump handled things was what American strength looks like in a world that's becoming not unipolar. I mean, it's multipolar. I mean, China's rising, Russia's rising. These are not good things. They're just reality. It is, if you mess with us, you will die. And that he showed that with Qasem Soleimani. He showed that in other instances. That's what we don't have right now in this White House. So we're kind of strong, but we act weak and we retreat and we don't advance our interests aggressively. So the world only gets more dangerous. So it's not an exact calculus, but it certainly has to center around strength. And then knowing where your interests lie and not getting bogged down in something that actually helps your enemies because you're getting bogged down.
So what does it look like then, Pete Hegseth, this relationship between China, Russia, Iran, that you're right, President Trump kept at bay or kept somewhat in check during his 4 years? It certainly feels like they're emboldened these last 3 years. Is that the best case? Maybe it's economic, but is that certainly one of the best cases for Donald Trump versus, first off, any of his primary opponents, and then again, potentially against Joe Biden in a rematch?
I think it is. I mean, obviously you've got the invasion on our southern border. Obviously you have the status of our economy. You got to rebuild our military, all of that. But what Trump was doing was disrupting a foreign policy consensus, which led to the rise of China, which led to the complacency of Europe, which led to our overextension of our military, which put us in this precarious place. So, and I was a part of that. Like, a lot of us were a part of this sort of the two foreign wars post 9/11 and all the implications of that. But you have to step back and say, did it really make us safer? Did it really put us in a better position? Or were we distracted spending billions and trillions while China quietly consolidated economic alliances and military alliances, and now, domestically is focused on building up their military? We somehow pushed Russia and China into each other's arms. In a marriage of convenience that's all centered on anti-Americanism. So Europe's got to defend itself. We have to defend our own borders, and we better recognize the strategic places to intervene to maintain our dominance. Otherwise, China's looking to run the world in 30 years, and I don't want to live in a world run by China, because it's a very different world.
Pete Hegseth, he's going to be hosting the Patriot Awards on Fox Nation from Nashville. It's coming up Thursday night, 7 o'clock Central Time. Should be a great show, right, Pete?
It'll be a great show. Listen, I know it's about an 8-hour drive from Kansas City, from your stomping grounds, but we still have a few tickets left. So if there's anybody out there that wants to come to Nashville last minute, I would love to have you. The Patriot Awards on Fox Nation. It's a celebration of America. It's at the Grand Ole Opry House. It's going to be. You can watch it live on Fox Nation, obviously, but it'll warm your heart about what America's all about, and those quiet heroes that don't get recognition. That on one night we make sure the spotlight shines on them.
I love it. Pete Hegseth, always good to have him on KCMO in Kansas City. Thanks for the time, Pete. Really appreciate it.
Thank you. Thanks, Pete.
All right, there you go. Well done.